afternoon. Glad to have you join us on another edition of Standpoint. I am Veronica Danik-Boy. As usual, we will be beaming our searchlight on issues that made headlines during the week. My panelists today are all lawyers. Onyekachi Ubani is the Vice President of the Nigeria Bar Association, Libera Soshoma, and Uju Okeke, all lawyers. Thank you for coming on the show. All right. During the week, the Federal High Court in Abuja gave judicial backing to the executive order by the President Muhammadu Buhari outlawing the indigenous people of Biafra and its activities. The court declared that the activities of IPOB in Nigeria, particularly in the southeast and south-south regions, now constitute acts of terrorism. The Nigerian army had, on the heels of its court-named Operation Python Dance 2, in the southeast and south-south zones, declared the IPOB an illegal organization. Their actions elicited varied reactions, with the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, being amongst those that faulted the Nigerian army, which he said lacked the constitutional powers to prescribe the group. Now that the federal government has followed legal procedures, some lawyers have described the court order as a mockery of justice. They say it is wrong for a judge to make declaratory orders upon an ex parte application. Other Nigerians are accusing the federal government of meting out differential treatment to Nigerians depending on where they come from. It's a grave injustice, to say the least. They say the federal government should also outlaw the activities of Fulani herdsmen who occupy the fourth position on the world map of terrorist organization. Now, gentlemen, I'll start with you, Barrister Ubani. Following the trajectory of events surrounding IPOB, did you see us coming to this juncture?
Did I see it coming to this level? I would have played God if I say I foresaw what is actually playing out. But I know that along the line, something has to give way. Something must take place. And we are happy that procedures of the law is actually being followed now, because initially we thought that it was wrong, and we said it, that the military has no constitutional or legal power to pronounce IPOB a terrorist organization. There is no procedure for them to do that. The law is explicit as to the organization, to the body that should bring an application before the court, because it's a judicial process, and we said it. And then even the governors lacked what we call locus to also prescribe IPOB, because the law did not allow any governor or any executive to do that without the proper bodies actually authorized. So it is either the Attorney General or the National Security Advisor or the IG of police that will bring an application before the court in chambers, before the Federal High Court in chambers, and then present all the facts that actually make that organization to be an illegal one. And then the court now will make a pronouncement. And then after that, it will be published in an official gazette and then into national newspaper or in any other forum or fora that the court will determine. Then the good thing about the judicial process of this process is that whosoever or which organization has been branded illegal has a right to now apply by way of application to the same court, and then tell the court that what has happened behind me, because it's motion ex parte actually, that the law allows the other party, that whatever has happened is wrong, that this is actually the true facts of the situation, that we are not illegal, that we are not a terrorist organization, and those facts will now be presented to the court. And the court, if satisfied with the presentation of that evidence by the victim, can now reverse the order or maintain the order. So being a judicial process, we are happy that it's going through that process. And as a lawyer, the matter is sub judice. We will not go too much into legal technicalities and details of this issue, since the matter is before the court. Yes.
Okay, so I come to you now, Uju. Before now, there has been eyebrows raised, and even after the courts, made it legal, there has been some controversy stemming from lawyers saying that it is a mockery of the judicial process. Where do you stand in all of this?
Well, for me, it's really interesting what is happening, because we are developing the law. I am glad the matter is before the court. And now let's see, because Kanu has appealed from what we read.
Yeah.
So now let's hear what the court would say, because a case like this has not gone to court before. So now that the matter is in court, let's hear what the court will say about it. Because of course there has been argument and counter argument on whether IPOB is a juristic person and all that and all that. So let's even hear, because if going by the definition of terrorism, in fact anybody could be termed a terrorist. Because what is the definition of terrorism? By going by Terrorism Act, it says any act that harms or damages the government or the international organization, or even any act that compels a government or international organization to do something or abstain from doing something is a terrorist act. So invariably, anybody, any act at all could be termed a terrorist act. So now that the matter is in court, let's see how it goes.
So, but given the reasons, by looking at the reasons given by the military, is it enough to term the IPOB a terrorist organization?
Like I said, if you look at the definition of terrorism, it is too broad. Anybody, any day could be termed a terrorist based on the definition of it. It is now for the court to be satisfied. Now that ex parte application has been gotten behind IPOB, behind Kanu, he's back in court, he's appealing it. So let's hear what the court will say. Let's see whether the court will still say, oh, I'm truly satisfied. Or, okay, based on the facts before me now, I'm changing my mind.
All right, now I come to you now, Liberals. Before the ex parte order and before Kanu's appeal, let's look at the processes. Some are saying that we seem to be in a hurry with all of this that has been going on with IPOB.
Yes, I agree completely that we seems to be in a hurry. If you pick the papers today, you hear government saying that they will soon name sponsors of IPOB, account holders that have, paid money, to finance IPOB. Similar tunes. You remember those days, previous government would say we'll soon name backers of Boko Haram and all of that. And so, the question for me, should have been, and I've consistently maintained, should have been, if 50 years after Biafra, why are we still discussing Biafra? 50 years, 50-something years after independence, we're still discussing restructuring. 50-something years after independence, or 60 years after the Willings Commission of 1957, the fears of the minority that gave rise to that commission, we're still discussing them. What it means is that in all of those years, we have not addressed all of those problems. We left them unaddressed. And so even if we don't address them today, 50 years from now, you're still going to be confronted with those same problems. And so, for me, Kanu, IPOB, and, first and foremost, the military came out to say, look, we've declared, this organization a terrorist organization, and then the governors met that same evening prescribing the organization, and some of us shouted, no, that the freedom, the essence of the Section 2.1 of the Terrorism Prevention Act is that the freedom to associate is a constitutionally guaranteed right. And so for you to take away that freedom, it must be through a pronouncement of court. In the same way you say freedom to move around is a constitutionally guaranteed right. But for you to restrict somebody's movement and imprison that person or sentence somebody to death, it must be through a pronouncement of court. And so then government, even though government at that time had argued, no, we have the right to do it. Later, I think they sat back, looked at the laws and said, look, okay, what we did was not to a pronouncement, was just a declaration. And now the Attorney General had gone to court. And then there's been this argument back and forth, like my sister Uju had said, it's a catch 50-50. Let's watch the way it will play out. IPOB had raised a defense, oh, you can't, which for me, though, is not too tenable. Yes, we are not a registered organization, so you can't prescribe or you can't sue an organization that is not registered. But still, they've gone to court to challenge, the order made. They've gone to court through a motion application, a motion on notice. The issue here is government going to say, look, you can't come to court to challenge this order because you are not a registered organization? and is IPOB now going to say, no, we can challenge this order since you have sued us in this name and all of that. So these are issues that the courts, will eventually deal with. And like Ubani has said, we wouldn't want to go into too detail into the legal technicalities so that we will not prejudice the mind of the court. But really, if you to answer your question directly, rather than look at the issues that gave rise to all of this agitation, we're so much in a hurry, to deal with, the people, the perceived enemies. When you have, thank God you raised the issue of Fulani headsmen. You had the issues of Fulani headsmen, and the government has been treating it with kid gloves. Government even came out to say, no, they are not terrorists, they are criminals. But worldwide, they've been declared terrorists, And so you have the crisis in Kaduna. Even it was on record that the governor of Kaduna State said he paid these people because they came to avenge the killing of their cows. And by the definition of terrorism in that act, that is even worse than terrorism.
That is worse than terrorism. And so I come back to you now, Barrister Ubani. Some have said that instead of an ex parte order, there could have been other ways of treating this issue that could have been handled better. What other ways could it have been dealt with instead of using an ex parte order to arrive at prescribing the group?
Are you still referring to judicial process?
The judicial process.
Well, the law is explicit that you bring that application in chambers. And most times, if an application is actually prescribed in a manner that it should be brought in chambers, it's usually ex parte. It's usually by ex parte application. But as I said earlier, when that order is made, you still have a process of bringing your own application to set it aside, in order now to furnish the court with, better particulars as to the wrongness, illegality of that particular ruling or judgment of the court. So I don't think it is clearly a ground for an argument to say, oh, why didn't you put us on notice? Because the word used there is in chambers, and most applications that are taken in chambers are usually by ex parte, by ex parte application. He didn't say by putting the other party on notice. So the government chose going by way of ex parte. But as I said earlier, the particular act itself now made a provision that whosoever or any organization that has been so pronounced or prescribed has a right of coming back to the same court by way of application to now furnish the court with proper information as to why that particular organization shouldn't have been proscribed in the first place. So that's why it is very important that this is a judicial process, because if it is actually the military that has the right, would you go back to the military and say military? So
are you saying that the other processes are dealing with these issues cannot really put or solve this whole IPOB hullabaloo or the issues surrounding all of this?
I don't understand. You made the question clearer.
You said it's better, it is a judicial process.
That's right.
So, but some are saying that aside judicial process in solving this matter, there are other ways in terms of dialogue.
Oh, fine. Okay, that's what I was saying. Is it a judicial? Our question is here about judicial process.
No, when you
now, in fact, some of us have even prescribed, a political solution to this problem. Because I was so happy when my president, while in the UN, this meeting that just ended in
United Nations.
Beautiful. He was even referring to what is going on in North Korea, and then emphasized that we must negotiate, even with the man. So if my president will prescribe negotiation with a man that the entire world is calling a rocket man, then I see no reason why we cannot also employ negotiation and political solution. Even though some people will be so angry, oh, don't negotiate with the terrorists, don't talk with, we did with the militants, for God's sake. And that's why we have some level of peace in that environment. The acting president did it. Because these guys were blowing up, your economic this and that live. And he said, no, we cannot continue this way. And that is why you have some relative peace in that environment. Even to Boko Haram, my current president said, look, we are ready. Let's sit down and talk over this issue. For them even to release some of the Chibok girls, was it not by way of negotiation? I'm saying that there is nowhere negotiation is foreclosed in this life. Because no matter the level of war you engage with somebody, everything usually ends at the discussion table. So if we will still come to discussion table to discuss the issue, why would you not take that particular option, which is less costly, you know, in the first place? So to me, if anyone is saying don't negotiate with them, it's arrogant, that some people will now come up tomorrow and hold the country to ransom, these are arguments people put up on sentiment. The fact is that this guy has followership. There are guys following him, whether for good or bad, whether those guys are referral, whatever. If you go today, Kano has followers. So for having those followers, what is the issue that make people to begin to follow a man that is not making sense in your own world? You know?
Exactly.
So people are saying it is a failure of leadership. It's a failure of good governance. And if you have failed, and these processes are cropping up, including Boko Haram, including all the agitation all over the country, what do you do? Is it not for you to sit down and say, look, let's now begin to solve those problems one after the other? He has rightly pointed out. Or else, in 50 years' time, we'll still be talking about these issues. So I think all those who are advising president, don't ever negotiate. The way is to deal with them, crush them. He has never solved any problem anywhere in the world. If we can talk about negotiating with the man, with the so-called man in North Korea, then I see no reason. We must enter into with every person to actually have peace. Because without peace anywhere, my sister, you can never have any development. So peace is a panacea for development of this country.
All right, quickly, many people have argued that Nnamdi Kanu's agitation for Biafra was a peaceful one since he hasn't taken up arms against the nation. Even though there are videos of him soliciting for arms and funds, there are also videos of him spewing some hard rhetoric. In one, he said if he was rearrested, his boys will burn down the country. Now, I come to you, Uju. For someone to come up so strong and saying talks like this, saying my boss will burn down, should we really sit down at the table to negotiate with such kind of person?
Well,
when she finishes, I would like also to answer that. It's important because you need my view concerning that. He also will answer over that. Yes, it's important.
Well, for me, first and foremost, I didn't see the videos. But then, for me, if an individual commits an offense, we have the criminal code. The laws are there. If an individual commits an offense, why don't we pick the individual and then prosecute the individual? That's the way I look at it. If Nnamdi Kanu or whoever commits an offense, pick the person, arrest the person, then let's go to court. This is still a lawful society. But then I have an issue with when something happens, like what is happening in the Southeast, then there's an Operation Python dance. I have a serious, because for me, it is humiliation of a region. It is not right. If Nnamdi Kanu and whoever, and you know them, you claim you know them, go and pick them, handpick them, prosecute them. But then don't stage Operation Python dance in the East. Okay, for instance, is it not possible that there are people that believe in the IPOB ideology that are not even in the Southeast? So why terrorize the Southeasterners? Because of Nnamdi Kanu and whoever it is you know. So I think for me, anybody commits offense, pick the person, prosecute the person.
Well, Liberals, you want to react to that?
Yes. First and foremost, I want to react to the issue on ex-parte application and then go to this one. You know, if you look at the acts, the definition of terrorism is broad. And then for a terrorist act, you don't need to wait to invite the other party to come to court. That's because all those time spent in inviting, you know, a lot of damage or more damage would have been done. And so that's why the act prescribed that you go first. Because the essence of approaching the court ex parte is for you to forestall, you know, a danger, you know, that's about to be done. And so in this case, the government feels, oh, look, there is a dangerous trend that we are witnessing. And so please grant us this order. You have a right to call the person later to come, you know, defend. But for now, just grant us this order so that we'll be able to forestall, you know, future harm on, you know, the peaceful environment. That's for that. And then for the approach, basically, I think, like I said, it is opportunists will latch on to opportunities such as this, such as the, you know, the ills in the society, the balkanization of Nigeria by politicians to look for relevance. And so I see Nnamdi Kanu as an opportunist. And then who sings the tunes of the ills in the society? And so people naturally will follow. And so if you want to extinguish Nnamdi Kanu, like Ubani said, address those ills that, you know, that will make people, you know, follow him. And Also, if you remember in the inauguration speech, the president said, I belong to no one and I belong to everybody. A week later, he said, you don't expect me to treat those that gave me 97% with the same way I would treat those that gave me 5%. And then his body language also tend to lay credence to the latter speech. And so all of a sudden, people from this region started feeling, oh, look, we don't have a sense of belonging in this entity. And there was serious tension. And when Oshibanjo was acting president, the first time the president traveled abroad, the man simply visited the Southeast, visited Rivers State, and doused tension. He walked on the street of Yenagoa.
Yes.
What will it cost this government to go hold a stakeholders meeting in the Southeast, for example, assuage the fears of the people, relate with those people like Ubani that are diehard supporters of this government, and few other people there, give them sense of belonging and confidence to walk tall in the midst of their people who believe that this government don't like them.
But they sent a delegation from the northern governors.
That is after all of this. And that's also a very laudable step. But the government at the center is what we're talking about now. So during the campaigns, you saw the president wore, what you call this, your...
the tiger head.
Tiger. Yeah, you saw the president wore it. What that means is, look, I'm one of you.
That's
you're
branding.
Irrespective of branding.
That was branding.
But after the election, have you ever seen the president dressed in that manner? So how do you give a people a sense of belonging? If I wear the president, simple. Go to these same people, blame those that you need to blame. Those people that have consistently kept that region in the dark, including some of the leaders from those regions, some of the governors. Allow also, make the people see the reasons why some of the problems that they're complaining about is not just a problem from the center alone. And then promise those that are already in the budget, promise, the ones that you can do, the low-hanging fruits. Deliver on them. Also, that will give people the confidence to say, oh, you said this man hates this region. Look at what happened when they went for Ogoni cleanup exercise. People were saying, you said this man hates this region. That's but right. Even when your son was there, he didn't do this much. And so, what stopped the federal government from, with that, when you do that, even people that are diehard followers of Nnamdi Kanu will begin to have a rethink. But when you make it, because Nnamdi Kanu's preaching message, no matter how irrelevant it is, it's an ideology, and you cannot kill an ideological army with guns. And so what do? You attack the ideology. It is also easy for people to say, look, after all, we've had these issues before. Mind you, we have a government of change that says they want to do it differently. So don't point to, how did the Jonathan government do it to me? Because that's past. This is a new government. How would you want to achieve? Because if you go to court, God had prescribed the organization, the name IPOB. What stopped them from registering another name tomorrow? And continue, but the issues remain. And so we should be very tactical.
The focus should be the issues. All right, you can throw in your
what I was saying
now.
is that, I as a responsible citizen of this country would decry any method that somebody adopts, that actually, make him look a bit immature in his approach. I mean, when you are, addressing injustice and all that, bring those things out. And Nnamdi is addressing those manifest injustice and all that. But the language and the method is what I decry.
Yes.
Are you following me?
Yeah.
You cannot use a method that put a whole tribe in danger. Because we know how Igbos are. We're all over the place, and we have made several investments all over. So you cannot ask them now, quit that environment and return back to where? And all that, and endanger the entire race. And now you make some pronouncement, or you have the head of the president. No. God and nature has entrusted the leadership position to you now. And you have so many followers. So what you say matters. And so you now watch your utterance and then use a matured approach to an entire process. Exactly. And at the end, you gain the respect. I would have even want Kano, can you, to start with, and say, look, you guys that are governors of this particular region, you have not helped this region at all. It is high time we begin to now put people who we trust, who we know the antecedent, to begin good governance. Look at what Governor Bodo is doing in Lagos. These guys sat down to listen to most of this analysis on radio and television and all that. And immediately he came in. Look at the man now, surpassing even what Fashola has done. So what I'm trying to say is that Nigeria is still work in progress. we are aware of those manifest injustices, you know, both in the Southeast and all over the country, and we know how the political elites come together to share the loot of this nation. It's only when there are issues they begin to now use us and all that kind of fund. So let us know this thing and understand it. So I understand what the message is preaching, but I want him to use a different approach. And that is what the governors even told him. Oh, Kano, you have drawn attention of federal government to all this issue. Can you tone down in the language, in the manner you go about it? And you gain the respect of not only us, also even of the federal government, and they will listen to you. And Kano cannot achieve all these things without having the elites, because he needs to the elites. No matter what, if you schedule a meeting now with the president of the country, the president will look at those who want to see him. First and foremost, he will need the leaders of the Southeast. And if he goes through the list, and he doesn't see any of it, how do you think he will honor that appointment? So it's important also, you know, that he must also work with the elite of this in order to actualize all this dream. Beautiful message is preaching about manifest injustice, but the manner, the approach,
his language,
and the lack of strategy, to me, is what I decry. And I think they should, people who are very close to him, should ask him to tone down and allow these things to be said, you know, properly.
Sorry,
yes,
quickly,
my brother.
This election coming up in Anambra State, yes, and you believe there's manifest injustice in the system, yes, and you have this large followership. That's right. Why don't you, channel the energy of your large followership into contesting for, this political office, and then begin to change it from the inside, right, instead of saying that there will not be elections. And that's why I say he's an opportunist that the federal government had given opportunity to. And so if you handle him the way he wants you to handle him, you will create, you spoil a lot of things.
All right, Uju, I'll come back to you when we return from the break. Stay with us. All right, you're still watching Standpoint. And now my question comes to you, Uju. We've been looking at the fact that dialogue is the way to go, but then in what way should it take on both sides? Okay, for me, the way I'm looking at it, we can always have a roundtable conference. I remember that we had a confab, and we had resolutions. We had points that people raised. Why is that not being utilized? But that may not be addressing what their grievances are. Are you sure? I am not sure. What are the grievances? Manifest injustice, inequity, unfairness. That's it might be some peculiarities to the zone. For me, if you look at the confab, if you look at the document of the confab, what they came up with, by the time that is addressed, every region in this country, every part of Nigeria will at least to an extent, to be satisfied, to an extent. Okay. Of course, it's agitation. Yes, of course. Normally, it's a human society. There will be agitations in the nearest future. But other people will wake up with other issues. Issues will keep cropping up. That's why it's a human society. But then I'm wondering, why are we not addressing that? Remember, we spent so much money on that. Why are we not addressing it? Because it's just about injustice, it's about unfairness, it's about inequity. Okay, we have a caller on the line, Mazi Okorafo. I hope I got your name correctly. You can go ahead with your contribution. I just talked about Mazi Okorafo from Aruch, in Aruch. Good afternoon. There are two major things I discovered about this IPOB matters arising. Let's look at unemployment issue. You take where you see that 95% of those young men, many of them are unemployed. Because the situation whereby we have not solved the problem of unemployment in Southeastern Nigeria is a big problem. Because let me tell you one thing. After State in Africa, do you know that all these young boys that we have, young girls among them, if you call them and say, look, let's tell you ahead, okay, at the end of the format. But if you engage them 2-4-7, they will not have time of coming to Rwanda. Now, look at what's happening in Israel. Israel today, if they see that you are good in one particular aspect of this that has to do with the place, they will bring you into the system as one of the security systems. I was thinking that the government would just gather those boys, put them all in security work, keep them in the fact as part of Nigerian security system. It will help us. This issue of doing this does not solve problems.
Thank you very much. Have a great day in Lagos.
Thank you, Mazi, for your contribution. Well, Liberal, as you were saying, government can provide all the employment.
Government can't provide employment for everybody. Government should strive to provide an enabling environment for business, private businesses to thrive. And so that's why you need to look at the entity called Nigeria and the structure of government that we're running. It is easy for governors to say, well, we basically run to the center, cap in hand, begging money every month. We can barely pay salaries. And so you have the issue also of inequality, even though it's a human thing. In Nigeria and at the National Assembly today, there is nothing you can, that can sail through that has to do with regions because they are not equally represented. And so that's why you hear agitations for state creation, state creation, state creation. Because you look at the setting, you look at the north, you look at the south, you look at the west, you look at the east, you look at all the states, and also representation has to do with, what do you call it, states. Take Kano State, for example. Kano State before now had 44 local governments. Then you carved out Jigawa State from Kano. And as we speak now, Jigawa has about 30-something local government, and Kano still has 44. And Lagos had remained the same. And so if you talk about representation from these two regions, the two states alone, and then you look at the southeast, before now they had just 2 states, Imo and Anambra. Now you have 5 states from that region. And so what they are saying is, look, we can't even pass anything through because clearly, manifestly, we're in the minority because from the representation that we have. These are elitists anyway. But also, if you also need to look at some of the complaints about representations, appointments in this. And so, manifestly, you see them reflect in that 97%, 5%. Oh, these people didn't give me vote. And so why should I look towards them? But for me, I think those that didn't give you vote, those are the ones that you should even try to impress so that next time you win their support and votes. And I'm not saying give all the positions that you have to them. But why will I be happy when an Obama is the president of America? Well, I'm not an American, but because as a black man, it gives me a sense of fulfillment and belonging. And so in Nigeria also, the fact that Obasanjo is from Ota, even though his presidency will not, positively impact on the people of Ota, but they are happy because, it gives them a sense of belonging. The same thing with Goodluck Jonathan, the same thing with the Buhari from Katsina State, for example. And so, in the same vein, if you look at all of this, when somebody from these places are appointed, and, it gives them that sense that, look, yes, this is Nigeria, and the way it is shared, it is, equitable, most especially when you hear people preach quota system, quota system, quota system. And so these are things we begin to, look at, address. And then, in rounding up on this point, if you look at the First World War, what led to the Second, the issues that led to the Second World War were fallouts of issues from the First World War. Because after the First World War, the Germans were treated as second-class citizens. And a crop of Germans who did not saw what happened in the war, came up to say, look, we need to. And so, after the Second World War, avoidable though, they were respected among the Committee of Nations. And then also they had a sense of belonging in whatever, happens at the Committee of Nations. And so gradually in Nigeria, you see everybody, that's why people are clamoring for restructuring. Everybody wants to have that sense of, look, belonging in the entity called Nigeria.
All right, we have a caller on the line from Kaduna. Are you there? Go ahead with your contribution.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
The question on the people are saying is very fantastic. I like the position of those on your station. But there is something that somebody said here that I don't really understand. He said, during the campaign, Buhari was wearing a attire of northern Nigeria.
This is northern Nigeria.
He was wearing the attire of eastern part of Nigeria. But since he came to power, he did not put on the attire the same. Have you ever seen him wearing any of those clothes to show their face that he can relate to them? I've never seen any of the presidents that wear outside the attire on.
All right, thank you for your contribution. Now, you want to quickly address it?
It's of no consequence.
No, really?
It's of no consequence. This
Okay.
issue of race is of no consequence.
I mean, but let's talk about the revelations made by the spokesman of the federal government about IPOB and their finances. The Information Minister, Lai Mohammed, alleged that IPOB is financed by individuals living in France and the United Kingdom, as well as looters in Nigeria. But France has said that IPOB's finance is not domiciled in France, and the UK is also seeming like it's not happy with the accusations being made at them. How does this, affect our image, Barrister?
After 9/11, the Americans, put up a structure to ensure that the extremists, I'm talking about the terrorists, never get funding. So they will block their source of funding. And it's a policy of government. Even Donald Trump, in this recent meeting, was also emphasizing that fact, that we must not only block them, we must also ensure that we decapitate, reduce their potency. It's a government policy. And so if you say you have found out the sources of, funding for IPOB, and you know that IPOB is actually will endanger the state, what you do as a government is to ensure that that particular source is stopped. You block it.
Before going public.
Yeah, before going, you block it. Because if they have, it's a live wire. If they have that money, they now begin to, make more trouble for your country, and your country becomes unsafe, even for investors and all that. No matter it is actually happening in the Southeast. The moment people hear what is going on in this, it affects the entire country. So no investor will want to come to a country that is not stable. So the government must be sincere in this particular revelation. If they have found the source of funding, it's a very good one. Let them now block it, and then block all the sources, not only of IPOB, including Boko Haram. Because for Boko Haram to have lasted up to this point in time, I still have this belief that these particular sources they're having from outside. And so the government must put up a policy, intelligence gathering, in order to ensure that their sources of funding is completely blocked, and decapitate them. Because without money, there is nothing they can do, including even the source of arms and ammunition for even Boko Haram and all that. So I think it's something that the government must not, do by way of propaganda. It's something that is a very serious, matter. And I would even want them to name those sources and all that. They have mentioned it. Let's know those guys who are funding IPOB and funding Boko Haram and others, agitators all over the world, all over the country. So that will make the government to be taken serious. But if you now mention and you don't name and you don't shame, but you say you will, and at the end of the day, you don't reveal it, people will not take you to be a propaganda, and that cannot be too good for the government. So I think that the government must be a bit more, cautious in this, proactive, and make sure that they block. I am very happy that they have found the source of funding. And that is the first step in making sure that they are decapitated. And then find other sources of other agitators all over, including Boko Haram, including the Niger militant. That is the way to go. And government must be up and doing, and they must be very proactive. So to me, kudos if they have found the source, but try and block them, sir.
All right, but then France is saying that their account is not domiciled in France.
Exactly, and that's why people are thinking, many people think it's propaganda. That's why many people think the government is lying. Because it's not just about saying you've seen. Do something about it. It's not just about talk. It should be beyond talk now. This is an organization, we don't like what they're doing, and we find the sources of the funders. What are you doing about it? You keep quiet, and then you just come to the pages of newspapers to tell us that you know the funders, and you don't do anything about it. So what exactly do you want people to think?
But can this affect our relationship with a country who is saying that you can't just accuse us of something that is not really happening where we are?
You see, Veronica, I need us to, government should learn to draw a line between somebody who subscribes to an ideology and pays, a contributory fee to that, to finance the activities of that ideology.
All right, quickly before you go on, we have Jackson on the line calling from Sokoto. Jackson, are you there?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Go ahead with your contribution.
Okay, talking about IPOB as an issue. I think it's not, because the plan here said, people, you describe us. Why not describe IPOB as pretty up to the IPOB to do?
Jackson, I would have to let you go because the line is not too clear. But if you can call back, ensure you do. All right.
Yeah, and so we should be very careful so as not to, strain the cordial relationship that we enjoy with some of these countries. There's difference between subscribing to an ideology and paying dues to that ideology. I speak to you now, you have so many people, peasants, who see Nnamdi Kanu and his association as that, which God has sent to liberate them. And so they pay contributory dues to finance that association. And so that's how some of these opportunists, they feast on the ignorance of the people. And so you can't rule out the fact that you saw the demonstration in New York by some people. Yeah. And so you can't rule out the fact that some of these persons also would be contributing to the accounts, or sending money to say, look, I subscribe to this idea and these are my dues. And if that's the case, the government should come out clearly to distinguish, explain, to say, look, this is because the France government now has said, look, we don't have an account domicile in this country in the name of IPOB. And so the British government also had come out. It is now left for the federal government to explain what it means instead of just this blanket, we'll soon name financiers. Because also, if you say, now that you have prescribed the activities of IPOB, and then you also need to take steps to ensure that, look, how are they getting funding? It's not just enough, because even in Boko Haram those days, the former government kept telling us, we'll know the financiers, we'll name them. Even when this government came on board, they told us the same thing till date. We still have not had names. And so it's not just enough to say, we have names, we know the financiers, and so we're going to name them. And ensure that the financiers you're talking about are truly people who are backing, with huge cash funds, including the ones that you said have been looted from your country. And not just people who subscribe to an ideology and they believe that, look, this organization is fighting for the emancipation of the people of their region, and so they pay dues to those associations. We have
Chuks on the line from Imo State. Chuks, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes. It's very important that we don't miss the basis of the entire thing we're talking about. First and foremost, I would like to find out if one single headsman, just one, has been tried in this country, just one. The other day in Jos, 2 innocent Igbo people were killed. 2. Nobody has talked about it. There's been no cry anywhere. Kill one Hausa man in Abia or Owerri or Onitsha or Enugu, and you see the kind of uproar we're going to have in this country. I'm being honest with you, every average Igbo man is sympathetic to the plight of every other Igbo man, including Kano. You can't push it away. I'm being honest with you. We all see the differences between an Igbo man and an illiterate headsman. We all see this. Even last 3 months, in Sarah's farm, the headsmen were there again. And yet, not even one has been tried in this country or convicted. And you're telling me as an Igbo man that I should be happy with this country called Nigeria. We must be realistic. I'm being honest with you. We have to start. We have to be in the ball. All
right, Chuks, thank you for your contribution.
Yes.
All right, you want to
I'm saying that Nigeria has a bilateral relationship with Britain and France. And so if you have an information that the Radio Biafra is domiciled in UK, and you have not in any way formally applied to that country, that you have a very perfect and cordial relationship, to do something about it, then it will be wrong for you as a government to now accuse Britain of complicity. It's also very wrong for you to accuse France of any complicity if you discover that the source of funding is coming from France, and you have not in any way bilaterally approached that government and said, this is what we found out, and this is not too good for us as a nation. And you have a cordial relationship with them. They are not a hostile nation. And then you now name France in a public announcement or in a program, that they are there is complicity from the part of France, whereas there is no communication with them as a nation. Formally, then it is a wrong approach. So I think that the government must try as much as possible to maintain cordial relationship with our friendly nations. And so if they have issues like this, they can collaborate with us. And so if anything comes up, they now fail, you can come up openly. Unless the government is telling you they have information that they have written formally and they have approached the government of these two countries and they remain very adamant and hostile, then you can come out and make that. But if you
they
have
denied it, that they never received any communication.
So that's the
All
point.
right, we have a caller on the line, Lawrence. Lawrence, are you there?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Go ahead with your contribution.
Yeah, I greet your panelists.
Yeah.
I think the solution to this problem is for us to put pressure on National Assembly and let them make provision for referendum. So the agitation from the southeast, we can put it on referendum. The majority vote yes, fine. And if the majority vote no, we walk out of it. The only thing that all the opinion leaders is we should put pressure on National Assembly to provide a referendum so that we can get this charade once and for all. That's my contribution.
All right, thank you, Lawrence, for your contribution. Which is stemming from what Barrister Obani said, are we likely to have a diplomatic backlash?
Well, it's not impossible. But then I also want to point to the fact that if you look at Terrorism Act, it does not just prohibit acts of terrorism. It also prohibits financing acts of terrorism. Mm-hmm. So if the government says it has evidence, oh, I know who the funders are, I know who the financiers are, so why is the government not making that public? But then, yes, coming to your question, of course, why not if not? Mm. It is, for instance, because you've accused the nation publicly of doing something, and the nation has come out to say, I didn't do what you're accusing me of. It would affect the relationship.
All right. Sorry, quickly. There are two issues here. First and foremost, you just proscribe the organization, you know. So, I think all of this should have been underground work, because as at the time, this whoever was financing or sending money, that word terrorism was not attached to that organization, IPOB. You did not formally write to these countries to say, look, from what we gather, these people are gradually breeding a group of terrorists. And so we are taking steps to label them as such and treat them as such. And so, like I said earlier, for all intent and purpose, those that were sending money probably might even be sending money for an ideology. You cannot take away the comment of Chooks, was it Chooks? That there are manifest injustice that people perceive. Mm-hmm. That when it happens, like I told you about the Kaduna massacre, and the governor came out to say, look, I had to pay them. Until date, nobody had been prosecuted. Till date, nobody had called the governor to ask him, who are these people that you paid? Who came to invade a community, an entire community, kill people because cows were killed, and they went away scot-free. It got to a point, we even said that, oh, look, these are people from neighboring countries. And our borders are so porous that people can come in, invade, and go back. As I speak to you now, Benue State, had not known peace for, quite some time because of the crisis, the menace of Fulani herdsmen. Government had come out to say they are criminals, they are not terrorists. And if you look at the definition of terrorism by virtue of the Terrorism Prevention Act, I wonder if that is not an act of terrorism, I wonder what becomes an act of terrorism. And so, all of this, and then the question you would ask me, why didn't this come up in the last administration? In the last administration, issues were different. We had never been this divided the way we were in the last election. A lot were said, hate speeches on both sides of the divide, and I expected that after the election, there should have been an opportunity to rebuild, to bring people together. And since that didn't happen, people started counting injustice. And some of these people, in the guise of financing liberation, agitation for self-determination, would naturally send money to say, look, these people, since we are not there to fight, these people are fighting a cause that we believe in. We want secession. We want a referendum to determine whether we want to remain in this entity. You need to visit the Aburi, Accord and all of that. And so that's why what we had said here, it is something you need to address, tactically. Otherwise, you begin to make pronouncement and attempt to label certain persons bad, you aggravate the problem.
All right, Barrister, looking at the way everything has played out as we have analyzed here,
that's right.
How would you evaluate the government's handling of the whole process? Some have said it is being politicized, and this naming could fan the flames of more crisis in that region and across the board.
Yeah, in my private capacity, I still have some people in this government that I talk to, and one of the things, yes, I talk to them, and sometimes I give them my own little advice. I post a lot. I'm very active on social media, and I write, and I know people that I tag who are in government. Now, what I want is that you cannot develop this country in the absence of peace. So we need every amount of peace we can muster. And I want the government to be very sensitive. When you are sensitive, knowing fully that the country is very fragile. So what you need to do is that you remove those things that create high level of fragility, and then bring those that will cement that relationship. Because the president himself says that, look, the issue of unity of this country is non-negotiable. Meaning that we have settled the issue of unity of this country. Now, in settling that issue of unity, we must carry everyone along. We must cement relationship. We must be sensitive in appointment. Even those appointments may not be beneficial, but the part that you put my brother there, even though he's not giving me anything, but his name is Ada Yoruba. So that's what the president requires. We need peace. And whatever that we can do to attain peace in this country, I will advise my President Buhari, to go ahead and do it. And
I guess you have summed it all up for us today on the show. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on the show. That's how we wrap up the show today. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to enjoy your weekend. I'm Veronica Danny Koi. Bye for now. God bless Nigeria.